In this video, I'm going to discuss knits. We're going to go over the different kind of knit fabrics, how to cut them out, and then how to work with them. So let's get started. The first thing that you're going to notice about knits as opposed to working with a cotton or a polycotton is that the fabric stretches. It's good for making t-shirts, dance wear, anything that you're going to need some sort of give on the fabric to stretch around your body. So I have three different major kinds. I have the single knit, double knit, and rib knit. The single knit you can tell because it has an obvious right side and a wrong side. So you can see the pattern on this side and then it's obviously white on this side. On the double knit, it looks the same on both sides. And then we have the rib knit here, and it's definitely the stretchiest, and it's used mostly for the cuffs on sweatshirts, on the collars of t-shirts, that type. Now with these two, you're going to definitely want to pre-treat the fabric. You're going to want to wash it because it tends to shrink more than regular cotton fabric. With the rib knit, you're not going to want to pre-treat this. You're just going to want to cut it out and then start working with it. So now we're going to go on to cutting out our knits. I'm going to be cutting out my tank top pattern on my single knit fabric here. And what you'll notice, mine is folded in half, which is fine, but what you'll notice is that one way will stretch more than the other way. So if I pull this way, it stretches a little bit, but not much. If I pull this way, it stretches a lot. If you're using a pattern, make sure you follow your pattern directions on laying out your pattern pieces because this stretch is going to make a difference in making your garment. And also your pattern pieces, you're going to want to make sure that you use a pattern that specifically asks for knit. If it asks for cotton and you use knit, it's not going to work the same because the pattern designers are taking this stretch into account when they create the pattern piece. So here's my pattern piece of my tank top I'm making. Here's the neck at the top, here's the bottom, and this is the sides. Here's the center back and here's the side seam right here. So I want to make sure that this stretch goes around my body and not up and down my body. So you're going to want to have the stretchy part of the fabric, or the way that it stretches, run perpendicular to your back or your front and then your side seams. So this is correct in how you're laying it out. I'm just going to put it on the fold like it asks for. And now we're ready to cut this out. For cutting out knit, it's best to use a rotary cutter, and the reason is because if you're pinning it, you're going to be picking up your fabric and you could be inadvertently stretching your fabric. So it's best to have it lying flat and using your weights to hold the pattern piece down. Now you can buy weights from the store. I just use cans because it's easier for me. So you're going to want to line up your cans along the edge of your pattern piece that you're working on. And always use a rotary cutting mat so you don't accidentally cut your table. And I'm going to use my rotary cutter right here on the edge, and just make sure to keep your fingers out of the way and slowly cut along your line here. I don't have a very steady hand, so I'm going to try not to cut my pattern piece as I go along. And then as I get higher and I move past my cans, I can just move them down like that. When you're sewing with knits, the first thing you want to do is you want to change your needle. We're not going to be working with a regular woven needle. You're more likely going to be working with a ballpoint needle. Ballpoint needles are good for the ones with larger weaves in the fabric. Like sweatshirt fabric, I'm going to be doing it with my single knit fabric. For the more stretchy fabrics, you're going to want to change your needle to a stretch needle. The needle's a little bit sharper, and sometimes if you find that you're skipping stitches when you're sewing knits, it could be you need to switch from a ballpoint to a sharp needle. So when doing your seams on knit fabric, you have two different options. The first option is you can do a small, narrow zigzag stitch. So I'm just going to start on my knit, and you're not stretching your fabric, you're just lightly guiding it with your hands, trying not to stretch it. And this is because the zigzag stitch affords some stretch in the fabric, which is nice. The next method is doing a regular straight stitch, and then you're slightly pulling the fabric as you're sewing it. So you're stretching the fabric a little bit. If we don't stretch the fabric at all and we do a regular stitch, once you put this on, it'll stretch the thread so much that the thread could snap. So that's why we want to give it a little bit of give. And you'll notice as it goes out the back, it'll start to pucker a little bit, which is normal. So I'm just going to hold my fabric as I'm sewing it. So it's stretching it. And then we'll show both examples. You'll see this is a little puckered back here. But I mean, that's just what happens as you're stretching it, as you're sewing it. So we're going to show you on the table both examples. So after you do the two different methods, is whatever you prefer. The main point is that they both have stretch. So on top here, I have the zigzag. So you see how it stretches with the fabric. In the bottom, I have my straight stitch. So they both they both stretch. I just prefer the zigzag one because for me, it just seems a little neater. So now I'm going to show you how to do seams. Here's my sample seam that I did. I have two pieces of my fabric that have been stitched together and a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Now if you're doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you can just go ahead and do your stitches as normal. But if your pattern calls for something larger than that, like for my tank top, it asks for a 5/8 seam allowance, you're going to want to go ahead and sew it, and then you're going to want to trim it down. Usually knit pieces don't have very large seams. If you look on the inside, most of them are overlock. So I'm just going to stitch mine down, or cut mine down right here. So it's a very narrow seam, and you're just going to want to test it out. If your fabric doesn't fray, you could probably just leave it like that. Now if you do seem to have a fraying problem, you can also do an overlock stitch or do another zigzag stitch here on the top to keep it from fraying, but mine looks pretty good, so I'm not going to worry about that. And then you're just going to press it open, and that's how you do seams, and that's how you work with knits.